Good morning. We're going to be talking about New York Shield Act. And my name is David Wolf. I'm co-founder of Just Solutions. So I'll give you a little background about myself. Been in the industry over 35 years now. It's hard to believe it's been that long. I went to RIT and been in Western New York now for all the years since, so I guess I'm a New Yorker now, originally from Philadelphia. Worked for a bunch of IT companies. We started Just Solutions over 22 years ago. And a little over 5 years ago, we purchased Soyata Computers. A lot of people knew them in Rochester, built computers. And then in a couple years after that, we bought Astro Networks as a phone company. So we have a lot of clients in the area, all throughout Western New York, and we support a lot of different platforms. I've been making security a big focus of our business. And as you can see, I've gone back to school and gotten all the necessary certs, and also encourage our employees to get the certs. So I'm happy to answer anyone's questions offline. If there's something here that I miss or don't cover for you, I'd be happy to talk to you at a later time and go over any of your particular questions you have. We'll have question answer at the end of the session too. So don't hesitate for that. We're going to keep this to a 30-minute presentation. I don't want to kill you with PowerPoint, but there's a lot of material to go over, and then we'll have Q&A. Last week's Q&A went a half hour. There were quite a bit of questions, so we'll see where that goes this week. So what is the Shield Act? Here's our agenda. Who has to apply to Shield Act? What are the compliance requirements? How do you meet the compliance? Don't panic about the deadline of March 21st quite yet. And then we'll go in Q&A. So what is the Shield Act? It goes in effect this month. It was passed by New York State last year, and it applies to any business, regardless of where they are or what type of size they are, anything. If you have information on New York residents, that's very broad coverage. So if you have information on New York residents, this applies to you. So right off the bat, we all have employees. Maybe you don't, but if you don't have employees, I guess you're in a little better shape. But if you have an employee, one or more, you have private information on a New York resident. Out-of-state companies, same thing. So what's protected? Any personal and private information which can identify a resident, can identify a person. It's interesting here, it says natural person. So I guess Androids are okay. They don't have to worry about this. But all the natural persons that we have tracking on, driver's licenses, any IDs, combinations of accounts, account codes, email addresses, biometric information, photographs, identifiable information. And most of us that have employees, you collect a lot of that for your I-9 file. So we do have that in paper form. We have some things in electronic form. Payroll records, doing payroll in-house or payroll is outsourced. We'll talk about that as well. But this is the information that's covered. It's very broad. I just want to make that clear to everyone. So a lot of people ask me, I don't really have this. Yeah, well, we do. We all have it. We'll talk about the level of it and the qualifications as well for compliance. So does your size matter? In a word, no. They have thresholds for how much effort a larger business is to put into protection of data and what the expectation is. But even a small business is required to have appropriate safeguards, reasonable safeguards for a small business. So even a 1 or 2 person operation has to do appropriate things. If you don't password protect things, if you don't encrypt critical information, if you don't back up that information, even as a small business, that's not showing basic safeguards. So they're asking for a reasonable safeguard, and we can help set that bar. It's also interesting that this applies to any business, regardless where they're located. Some of you might have heard of GDPR, which is the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation. And it is the same kind of law that protects any of the personal identifiable information of a European citizen, European Union citizen country, wherever their data may be. So if they travel or they come to the US and they're a patron of your business, if you collect information, maybe you're a rental car agency or insurance business, anything that you potentially would collect information on that person, maybe they're a temporary employee, contractor, whatever, you then are responsible for protecting that European Union citizens PII under GDPR. Well, New York State's doing the same thing. They're saying any New York resident data. So companies like Apple and Amazon have to protect our data. All those companies that we deal with out of state have to protect our information. So let's ask if you're already compliant. If you recognize any of these acronyms and you're following these, you're pretty well on your way towards compliance. PCI DSS is interesting because it's one of the few that are listed here that is not law. It's actually enforced by the payment card industry, and in order to accept credit cards, you've agreed to it. So by default, you have to comply with PCI DSS regulations and policies put on by the payment card industry. So it's not a government regulation, but you agree to it when you decide to accept credit cards. You have Sarbanes-Oxley, which is for public corporations, Graham-Leach-Billy Act, which affects financial institutions. Credit unions have their regulations. FDIC, which we've heard of for protecting our banks, and HIPAA, which a lot of people misinterpret, but it really is Health Insurance Portability Accountability Act, not health information. It was really for protecting our insurance claims and your diagnosis and all your information that would go back and forth between insurance companies and doctors' offices and hospitals to make sure that they were protecting our data as it flowed throughout the medical world. There's another one, high tech, which is another law and regulation that came into place also for medical, which was talking about electronic medical records, electronic health registers, EHR, EMR. And you may have to be compliant under that as well. Don't just think that you're compliant because your software for your EMR, your EHR is HIPAA compliant. The rest of the business has to, or the practice has to be HIPAA compliant as well. So it actually expands beyond just the software regulation. So all of these, if you're doing any of these, are going to help you get compliant with the New York State SHIELD Act. So what are reasonable safeguards? I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on TV, so you're going to be hearing my professional opinion. I am not interpreting the law, but reasonable is one of those law words that lawyers love because it's very loose and broad and can mean a lot of different things. So what's reasonable? Well, reasonable is what any normal person would have an expectation of, what kind of protection you would expect. When you go to a restaurant, it would be reasonable to expect clean silverware, napkin, water glass, and prompt service. I mean, those are basic expectations, your food being warm and not cold. That's reasonable. So this is a very loose term, and negligence is really talking about, well, did that person make a reasonable effort to protect the information? So we'll talk about what's required for that. So here are the compliance requirements. You need to adopt a cybersecurity program. That sounds really ominous, but we're going to help you with that. You must appoint a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, or other person tasked with overseeing the cybersecurity program. Don't just think you can task this to your receptionist or your cleaning person or your warehouse person just because they're good on computers. That's not being reasonable. Reasonable is making sure that someone has the proper training and oversight to be overseeing a security program. A CISO can be a title that you assign to someone, but then there's also certification, which is the certification I recently went through. So you need to appoint somebody to be in charge of this program and implement the program. You need to conduct due diligence with any third-party vendors you deal with. That could be exposed or have access to your private information, your personal information. I give examples here. You can't forget the cleaning people that can come through your building if file cabinets are locked or people are leaving their screens on. If you're using third-party secretarial services, if you're sending data to your accountants or transacting business with attorneys and things of that sort, you have to conduct third-party due diligence to make sure they're protecting your information as well. And what is their exposure to your information. Training existing employees as well as new ones, making it part of your new hiring process, training people that you onboard, as well as showing that you're training existing employees. This is important. If you're going to have a seminar and you teach them on these types of issues, or if you're going to teach them HIPAA compliance and things of that sort, you should have a check-in, sign-in sheet, those kinds of things to show that people attended the training. Notification of a breach, but also unauthorized access is a big differentiator in this law. We're not talking about just getting hacked. We're talking about even unauthorized access, exposure. Someone was exposed to your data or had access to your data, whether or not they actually took the data. This is a lot broader than just pure breach. And then the state is expecting to be notified if it's over 500 records. You need to develop a response plan to basically accomplish number 5 and 6. So we have to talk about an incident response plan. What do you do if an incident occurs? And we're going to spend some time on the administrative, technical, and physical safeguards here as well. So we went through all 8, and let's talk about the first group of controls, and that's administrative. If you just to show you, we're going to talk about administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. And now we're delving into number 8 a little deeper here. So administrative controls are what you can adopt in terms of policies. These are more policies, procedures, written documentation, the things that you can do at an administrative level, not using necessarily technology, not using, which we'll talk about technology controls, not talking about physical access and physical controls. This is really how do you create rules and policies to help protect information. So the first recommendation, high recommendation, is have a CISO or someone focused on this and responsible for it in your organization. Do a business impact analysis. Now, this is a very broad document or effort. This covers a lot more than just data and data breach and PII. Business impact analysis says what happens if we have a flood? What happens if there's a coronavirus and our employees can't come to work in the area? What happens if there's a tornado comes through the area? So business impact analysis talks about other effects that can happen to your business, not just IT. So it's a very broad document that businesses should consider. There obviously is just a section there for data and that kind of area, but a BIA is a very broad document talking about anything that might impact your business, your power being out, your phone service going down, you name it. Employee training is really key. Everyone talks about that. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that because that is absolutely your weakest link, and we'll talk about why you need to make a bigger effort there. Review your service providers and make sure you have good written policies and plans. Spot checking people's desks. One of the administrative controls is actually walking around and seeing, are people leaving passwords taped to their screens? Are they leaving confidential documents out on their desks? those kinds of things. That's actually even something you can do at an administrative level. Let's talk about awareness training. Security awareness training is becoming very prominent in the minds of us in the security world, and we're trying to convey that to our clients, that before, training was always an afterthought. Now it's becoming something that's got to be part of the culture of the business. So for the longest time, we didn't do anything. We just relied on the tech solutions. We just said, well, IT's taking care of that. I don't have to think about it. Then you had the occasional coffee break, coffee meeting, water cooler discussion. Say, did you hear what happened to so and so? They did this or that, and they got in trouble for it. They were looking at something on their screen, their computer screen they shouldn't. Then you start sending out some videos, or maybe you did some training. The newest thing is really number 4 and number 5, which is actually doing testing. Phishing your own employees, trying to trick them into clicking on links, trying to trick them into responding to emails. We also do vishing tests, voice calls, where we try to trick and get information from employees. So the human firewall really is getting to the point where we need to teach all employees to be vigilant, suspicious, leery. Recently, there was a local company that 2 offices over, the accounting person never checked with the CEO to see if it was really a proper thing to do, but they literally wired 300 grand to a vendor. Well, it wasn't legitimate routing information for that vendor, but it was a legitimate, appeared to be a legitimate email from the CEO directing the accounting person to send the wire, which is not an unusual response. But they never confirmed it verbally. And then later that week, they were talking to the CEO about making some payments, and the accounting person said, well, we're short on cash right now. And the CEO's like, well, why are we short of cash? Well, she goes, you just had me wire 300 grand to so-and-so. And he's like, what? And that obviously uncovered the fraud, and unfortunately it was not recoverable. It was too late and too long gone, that the banking industry, and if you look at your wire rules and ACH rules, a very, very narrow window of recovery. We're talking almost 24-hour recovery period. Anything outside 48 to 72 hours is typically not even reversible. The money's long gone. So the human firewall becomes very important, and that training and phishing becomes something you must implement. And I recommend everyone implements that immediately. We've been doing it for well over 2 years here, and our employees have really been good about not clicking on things and identifying those emails, and we make sure the new employees are also put through that same training. Technical controls. This is the kind of stuff that you think of your IT department and your IT outsource company is doing for you. Not all these things are typical, so don't assume you're getting these services. What I mean by that is people have managed services or managed care or IT support and things of that sort, but that's typically the care and feeding of your network and your servers and things of that sort. Having a focus on security is a whole different level. So actually doing a risk assessment really shouldn't necessarily be done by the same people. I've had many of my clients get risk assessments done by third parties. It could be a CPA firm that has a consulting group that does it. It could be a third-party company that does risk assessments. Essentially, we go in and do third-party risk assessments. We're typically doing it for someone, so they have maybe internal IT or a third-party company. So getting a second opinion or another checkup on your network risk is kind of key. So it's a good benchmark to make sure, are we doing everything we can do? There's a bunch of acronyms here that I'll go through. We have our intrusion prevention service and intrusion detection service. Those are our tools that you could put on your firewall that help prevent intrusions and detect intrusions. So those are things that can be added to your firewall, or may not have them enabled. They may be third-party services you want to add. Probably the newest one that's coming to small businesses, and big corporations and banking have been doing this for years, government's been doing for years, is the SIM and SOC monitoring. Well, now it's getting to a point where there are companies that can do it for small businesses, and it's a lot more affordable. SIM is security incident and event monitoring, this basically reads your log files. Log files are on all your devices, and they're huge. They're so big that they self-purge, weekly, daily, monthly, depending upon how much volume. There's so much data coming through these logs that unfortunately no one looks at it. So there's been some really good software developed that scans through the log files, identifies bad events or threat actions or actors that are occurring, and reports it to a SOC. The SOC is a security operations center. Think of war games. Think of the guys in front of and the gals in front of those big screens monitoring the missile launches. Well, here a SOC is monitoring all their customers' alerts, and then the human element is reviewing them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But then you have the human element that reviews the results of the log alerts, and then the human interaction of raising it to a human review, and then alert. And all that happens in literally minutes, very short time frame. And then you're woken up in the middle of the night to say, hey, there's someone hacking, getting into your system. You need to shut down or lock it down. Endpoint protection, we've been talking about that for years, but now we're getting really more advanced on it. It's not just antivirus and anti-malware anymore. It's DNS protection, it's web filtering, it's email filtering. It's a whole bunch of other things that we're adding to endpoint protection. So it's no longer just having, oh, I've got Avast, or I've got Symantec, and I've got Norton on my machine, so I'm protected. No, those aren't good enough anymore. There's a lot more tools that we've added to our customers to help protect them. DLP, data loss prevention. This is a big problem. This is what you actually have to prevent. You don't want the data to leave your business. You want to make sure that they're not stealing that PII information. So encryption becomes a very important aspect, and that's what DLP, it looks for patterns, it looks for attachments in emails, and it prevents them from going out. So very, very important to think about DLP. That is a feature that can be added to your email services. It can be added to Office 365. It can be added to Google, Gmail, and G Suite. There are third-party companies. You can actually get services directly from Microsoft and Google, but there's also third-party companies like Proofpoint and others that provide DLP protection. It looks for credit card information, looks for social security numbers, birth dates. It tries to look for any identifiable information. Encryption is another piece of this, and this is basically saying, hey, when I'm sending anything that's important, it's going to go out encrypted. When I send a report, or I send data to my payroll company, or I send data to my accounting company or accounting firm, I'm going to send it out encrypted. Attacks could have been prevented. This is an interesting result of Verizon's data breach investigative report, that in almost every breach, there was evidence of the breach prior to them discovering it, meaning it was there in the log data. It was actually there if someone was looking. They're claiming the average is 8 to 9 months that the hack is in your system before you even know it. That's why they're able to do that, what we call the man-in-the-middle attack, where they're reading your emails and alerting your pattern of communicating between the CEO and the accounting department, and then the emails and the way it's worded is so similar and so exacting that it's hard to tell the difference. So they actually get inside your system and sit there learning and figuring out the ways you do business, who you conduct business with. That we had another company that actually got an invoice from a vendor. The vendor is someone they do business with. It was a bogus invoice. And then they kept getting emails saying your invoice is past due. You need to pay it right away. And they got ACH, and they were carrying on an email conversation with a illegitimate third party, and they didn't know it because everything matched. Everything looked the same. If they looked a little bit deeper or had any of that DLP protection or any of that kind of capability, they would have noticed that it wasn't a .com, it was a .co, and it was the same domain name, just a one character difference alteration. And they were emailing, and it looked identical. The logos were all stolen, all that kind of stuff. And it was only $14,000, but I'm saying only, right? Now they have $14,000 gone. They can't recover it. They thought they paid the bill. Guess what? They still got to pay that bill again. So it's really, It's happening right here, right in town. These are all local examples of what's happened to people. So don't stick your head in the sand and think it's only happening to big businesses. That's not the case at all. So what is the cybersecurity process? This is what I'm explaining about having the SIM and SOC. You basically do the automatic detection. You grab the log data from your web server, your domain controller, your firewall, your antivirus, your switches, your routers, your IDS, IPS. So it's collecting all that data. It's putting into the log collector, and then it's sending it up to the SIM that analyzes it, and it knows what's noisy, what's typical traffic, and then anything that's unusual traffic. So yes, it uses AI technology. One of the companies I work with is using IBM Watson's mainframe for processing the data. Well, that information then goes to human expert analysis. They actually look at it and say, okay, here's an alert. Is this legit or not? And then from there, you get alerted back. This time frame we have watched, and it's happened in less than 10 minutes. In fact, the company that I work with guarantees that it's 10 minutes or less, that from the time they see an activity that is suspect, that it's been analyzed and you've been alerted to it. 10 minutes is unbelievable, because you can literally, when you're talking about 8 or 9 months of someone being in your system, finding out within 10 minutes something might be happening and being able to shut it down is just phenomenal. So we have customers that we have this on. As soon as we have an attempted breach, someone's trying to hack in and it comes from the Ukraine or Russia or North Korea or whatever, we're able to shut down that IP address immediately and prevent it. We can't just block every IP address, because there's too much legitimate business out there too. Too many people do business in China. We have clients that have plants in China that trade with China, European countries. It doesn't matter. So you can't really just block and isolate yourself. You still need to conduct business. So you really need to do the analysis part. So what are physical controls? We're probably most familiar with these because these are things we've been beat up for years, and that is backing up our data. The problem is some people are still laxed about it. Some people just use a USB flash drive to back up their data. Some people think a NAS is good enough to back up their data. Well, those things get encrypted and those things get stolen as well. So backup is for you to recover. But if the backup is not secure and protected, then it's there for the bad guys too. So you also have to think about who has access to the data. Most of you don't do a good job protecting the actual data from people getting to it, getting to the files or getting to the databases. We picked up a new account, and they were a CPA firm. I'll leave them nameless, but when we came in there, everyone logged into their workstations and their network with the admin credentials and admin privileges. First thing we did was we changed all that policy. Unfortunately, it was too late. You remember the 8 to 9 months? Someone had already infiltrated their system and stolen their whole Lacert database of tax information from the previous year. They didn't know this until the IRS started notifying their clients and them when they were filing their returns that, I'm sorry, we've already received your return and we've already processed your return. They literally had over 100 clients' data previously taken away because of this admin rights, because they had access to the Lacert data, and they were able to process false tax returns. Now both the CPA firm and the clients are all dealing with that whole headache of disputing it and going through all the claim process the IRS has to do that. Months and months of effort and hours, and in some cases lost refunds. Because the government won't pay twice, regardless if it's not their fault. So access to data, storage of the data using encryption. If you have laptops, here's an expensive lesson for the University of Rochester. How about a $3 million HIPAA fine for a laptop and USB drive that went missing or was stolen? Don't know. Wasn't encrypted. They knew that data records were exposed, over 50,000 patient records or things of that sort. Not exactly sure on the quantity of their numbers, but I am clear on the fine, and strong U of R, $3 million fine. Big lesson, big expensive lesson, and yes, they have lots of security, but it only takes one employee, one doctor, someone who doesn't follow the process properly. That laptop leaves the facility, gets stolen out of a car, it's not encrypted, boom. It is now a breach, and it's a reportable offense because according to HIPAA, it wasn't encrypted, protected data. That's a breach. How do you dispose of your data? We crush hard drives here. When we recycle computers, we crush the hard drives. I tell customers, if you have a machine shop or you have, handy guys in the back or maintenance people that can do it, you can put a drill bit through the old hard drives. But hard drives are in your old copies or in your old computers. They shouldn't just go out to the recycling center because the recycling centers don't scrub the data off of there. So if you want to destroy the hard drive, the best thing you can do is literally just physically destroy it, put a drill bit through it. What is your disposal of the data? That's the hard drive. What about old data? What are you doing about destroying data on old backups or old tapes? What are you doing about your old files or using a shredding service? We use certified document destruction. We have a shredding bin that's locked. Any documents, anything that has any kind of information on their identifiable information is going in that shredder bin and they're shredding it. So your protection of data and those little things important. It's very easy for you to have a shredder. It's very easy for you to destroy a hard drive properly or give it to us and have us do it for you. Protecting the data gets a little tougher, and we'll talk about what you can do for physical controls. And one of them for access to the data is two-factor authentication. You're going to hear more and more about this, or multi-factor authentication. Some of you don't realize you're using it already, but when you go to your online banking and you log in and then it sends you a code to your phone and you have to type that code to get as a secondary method of authentication, that's what we're talking about. Well, now we're doing it with your email, we're doing it with your applications, we're doing it with your systems. So when you log in to get your email, it prompts you for that code. So you have to have your matched phone with you. The good chance the guy in Ukraine is not going to have your phone to be able to get that second factor authentication number sent to them to be able to hack into your account. So multi-factor or two-factor, the second factor can be your phone, it could be another mobile device, it can be other things, cat card, things of that sort. So you might have seen those little RSA tokens people have that have little LED screen on it that the number changes all the time. That's another example of a multi-factor authentication tool. This is becoming almost a necessity, and all of our systems that have our client data is protected by multi-factor, every system that we use. Strong passwords. This has changed and keeps evolving. It's getting longer. We're going to phrases, 15 or more characters. Basically, think of writing a phrase or a sentence. Mary had a little lamb is a stronger password than any kind of short word with substitution that you can think of. You don't have to do substitution. They're saying it's not necessary. Obviously, it adds to it, but the hackers got smart. Their algorithms run all the substitutions too. So if you're doing @ symbol for A's and you're doing exclamation marks for ones, well, they're doing the same kind of thing in their hacking programs. So really, the longer is the important part. The reason we say use a phrase is they aren't guessable. You can remember them. It makes it easy for you because we know strong passwords are an inconvenience, but you got to use them. So if your password sucks, and you can test your password on some sites that actually like to harvest passwords, but there are sites that you can go to test your password that are legitimate, and they'll come back and tell you your password's too easy to crack. Non-compliance penalties. Here's where the rubber meets the road. We are actually only the Attorney General can sue. That's not to say this won't change, but right now, the way the law is written, the Attorney General's office is the only people that can sue you for non-compliance with the SHIELD Act. Now, doesn't mean if you aren't compliant, a third party couldn't use that as a basis to sue you and recover an award, but right now, the law doesn't apply that you can sue under the SHIELD Act. You have to would sue under negligence, and then you could possibly prove the SHIELD Act and use that as part of your negligence claim. Again, I'm not an attorney. But what's it gone? They've doubled the price from $10 per record to $20 per record. They raised it from like 150,000 to 250,000 per incident. And then this is the little interesting phrasing, reasonable safeguard violations. This is the little catch catch-all for us little businesses. They can whack us up to $5,000 per violation for a small business. So the big businesses are looking at the per record number. If you don't have 500 plus records, well, okay, you may not fall into that, but they're going to nail you under this other one called reasonable safeguards. And then you, of course, have the cost of negative publicity. Reporting a breach, 10 days. You must notify consumers. Remember what I said of breaches: unauthorized access to data as much as the data being taken. So if someone had unauthorized access, you have to notify the consumers within 10 days by written notice, electronic notice, or telephone. Please document this. This is very important to prove that you did that. Because if it's under 500 and you're not notifying the state, and someone comes back later and says, hey, my information was stolen from you guys, and you need to be able to prove that you did give them proper notification, which means they can change their password security or that type of thing, or put a credit lock on their identity and things of that sort. Over 500, you're reporting to the state. If it's over 5,000 consumers, you're required to notify all 3 credit bureaus. And of course, you have to notify the Attorney General's office. I give you the link. This is an online form you can go in and fill out. It's also the same place you can go and complain about a company if you feel your data was breached. You can actually report a business. So guess what? Your consumers can report you, same way you can report someone else. So here it is. Here's the link. And here's what you would have to do in terms of reporting a breach. Cyber breach insurance. We have it. I gave you the reference to the company that we use. I recommend that these guys provide all this capability. So we have all this coverage, which is above and beyond our normal business insurance. And in addition to our errors and emissions insurance, so our professional liability insurance, all that is one aspect of it. You know, your contents, your building, all those kind of protections. This is a whole new category of insurance that you need to get, and you should get coverage for your business to help protect you, because these can be very expensive breaches. The insurance right now is still reasonable, but I suspect, since so many breaches are occurring, that I expect these costs to continue to go up every year. But this is what we have as a business, and I recommend you look into it. And I shared with the company we use. Again, we're not an insurance business. We don't make any money on this, but this company, TechRug, has been great to work with. Technology Risk Underwriting Group is what their name is, and they understand digital assets protection, which is why we use them. How can we help? Wrapping up here. We can help you because I am a certified CISO. We can provide you with the templates. I don't charge for the templates. The templates is giving you a boilerplate. Again, you can go online to LegalZoom and you can download a template for a will. Doesn't mean I recommend that being your will and not having it approved by an attorney. Obviously, an attorney would tell you, oh, we should do your will. But you can obviously have the template. So I provide you a template for all these types of policies you need. Well, what are they? Alphabet soup: disaster recovery plan, incident response plan, business continuity plan, vendor policies, acceptable use policies. I'm happy to share them with you because they are literally boilerplate templates that you have to fill in the blanks. Best thing you can do after you fill in the blanks and do that self-evaluation is have someone like myself review them for you. What is a BIA? That's a business impact analysis. That's actually a very in-depth review of all your systems, your phones, your electric. Do you have a generator? What do you do if your facility is inaccessible? What's your hot site? Where are you going to send your employees? How are you going to work from home? This covers all kinds of things. What if there's a one of these armed incidents, active shooter incident? A BIA can cover and discuss all these things. Perform a security assessment. Again, we can do that. That's the self-standing service we use, and we use the NYS framework. And we give you a report on what should be done. Basically, this helps you find the holes in your plans, and so you can plug them. And then we can help recommend or provide remediation recommendations or services. SIMSOC monitoring, we recommend you turn it on immediately. We've been doing that for a lot of clients. It's a simple add-on. Again, it is a third party, 24/7 monitoring, but we set it up in your environment, and it doesn't take us long to do, but we highly recommend that. And also implementing a user awareness training. You can go out and do it yourself, or we can administrate it for you, where we set up the campaigns and we do the phishing with your employees. We provide you reports, and then the employees that are the click happy ones get sent through some training, and then they get retested to see if they're doing better. And we basically do this as an ongoing process to make sure your employees don't get tricked, and you're teaching them to be vigilant. The other way we can help is we can add our security stack. Again, endpoint protection is no longer just an antivirus. So we're adding in a bundle per user, we're adding the rights management, which is encryption. We're adding patch management, policy enforcement, not allowing a USB drive to be inserted into the computer, not allowing a CD-ROM to be burned. We're preventing, we're using AI, this new AI hunting software that looks for malware. We're looking for crypto software. There's software goes put on your machine to do crypto mining, and you don't know that they're stealing your processing power. There's a bunch of things that can be running in behind the scenes that the antivirus doesn't catch because it's not a virus. So hunting software looks for software by patterns and what they're actually doing and what they're trying to talk to versus a signature. Which is what an antivirus works on. So we add these 6 levels of protection in our new security stack. A lot of our customers have our current ESET, and might have Malwarebytes, and they might have WebRoot and things of that sort. But we've added all these additional protections. Browser protection, filtering, content filtering is a whole nother layer of protection. And then we always get asked for home businesses, what do we do? Since you still have to be compliant and you don't have the complexity of an environment of a big business, you really just need all the things we're talking about done for you on your little PC. So on your local PC, you need a password manager, you need your encryption, you need your backup capability, you need your patching and updating, you need your rights management and protection locally. So we provide that for you in our Guardian solution. You can go to our website, check that out. That's all of that. Let's get into some questions. I already see that we have some questions coming. And yes, we can send you a copy of the presentation or the PowerPoint. I will be happy to share the slides for you. Just shoot me an email and we'll make sure you get a copy of the PowerPoint. And if you want a copy of the presentation, we'll send you the link to the recording as well. And then if you'd like the templates, we'll send those to you as well. So just have to ask for them, and we're happy to share them with you. We have had a lot of people on last week's call, and some that weren't able to make it, so we ran it this week, and we're amazed that we had just as many come on this week as well. So happy to take any questions. You can put them into the question and answer section or into the chat window, either way. Yes, your documents and policies will only be investigated if there's a breach. They'll be there, or you'll have to present them and show them. There is, if you're under NCR 500, which is the New York State Department of Finance, DFS, Department of Financial Services, if you're regulated by them, you're licensed by New York State DFS, you have to actually sign an assertion every year by February stating that you've done your pen testing and you're doing all these things. So again, there are other regulations that you might fall under. Third-party janitors, interns are getting insurance. Too many companies don't have the certs and insurance from their third-party people, say they're janitor. They don't know what their policies, procedures are for background check and screening. That's becoming almost a new requirement. Are you screening and doing background checks on your employees? These become questions that get asked to you when you actually apply for these insurances as well. What I want to explain to you is that when you're asked these questions in your insurance questionnaire for getting the cyber liability policy, they'll ask you, do you have these policies in place? Do you have insurance coverage, certificate insurances from contractors and things of that sort? They ask you that because if you say yes And then when push comes to shove and you put a claim in and then you have to produce that stuff, you don't have that policy, you don't have those verifications, you just gave the insurance company an out. And all I can say, insurance companies, if you're on the phone, I apologize, but we all know they're going to do whatever they can not to have to pay out a policy or subrogate the policy. We had a customer, when we had our flood in 2006, a customer lost all their equipment in our flood. The insurance company said it was an act of God. The insurance company, even though our insurance company said it was an act of God, the customer's insurance company came after us and said we were negligent for not protecting the client's equipment and sued us for the value of the equipment that was lost, for the equipment that was in our building here in Fairport during that flood in 2006. So insurance companies will do that. They may pay the claim, but they're also going to go back and try to collect whatever they can, and they will do their investigative. So when you answer those questionnaires and you're saying, yes, we have a backup, cloud backup service. Yes, we're doing this. Yes, we're doing training for their employees. You will be asked to prove that when it comes time to collect on a claim. For overseas partners, that's a tough one. I think the best thing you can do there is make sure they're complying with GDPR. Make sure they're in compliance with that. They should be able to provide you some with proof and documentation that, and then really try to limit their access to systems. We have clients that have to be ITAR compliant. What that means is they can't allow non-US citizens access to data. They have to make sure things are firewalled and protected. So that means you have to log and show access control to the actual data. Just like you have a swipe in a door and a fob or something to get into a building, you can actually track and log getting access to databases or files to show that the only people that are allowed to access it are on this authorized list, that type of thing. So your documentation and logging for that becomes pretty important when you're dealing with out of state or overseas. But the good news is if you can make them comply with GDPR, then it's going to help you comply with the same kind of thing here. If you'd like to set up a review of your network security recommendations, I do there's different levels of assessments and audits. We do have a free network assessment, and then we have more expensive audits and actual reviews. So think of it as like the free tax return that they advertise on TV. We all know they're not free. It might give you the one piece of it. So yeah, I have some basic network assessments I do, and I use some tools to help generate that information. And then I have paid services, which we're happy to share with you the price schedule on that, so you see what's involved. We've done paid engagements for different towns and businesses in the area where they are required to show that they've done the security assessments and things of that sort. Again, I try to follow the NIST framework. That's the most widely accepted framework. You can Google that, and NIST 171 is what 800-171 is what I follow for our clients. And we have to do it if you have SCADA networks, if you have, if you're dealing with industrial controls, things of that sort. If you remember what happened with the story with the Target breach in the point of sale system that actually came through the controls of the HVAC system. They are on the same network. They weren't segregated, which is a fundamental practice. So those are all the kind of things we try to look for. Well, if there aren't any additional questions, please don't hesitate to follow up with me. My contact information is on the screen. I'd be happy to send you any of the information that I presented here, both the PowerPoint, share the templates with you, and we'll also share the link to the presentation if you'd like to share it with anyone else, and make sure if they miss it, you get them to see it. But thank you for joining us today, and wish you the best in getting compliant, and you can do it. It's not going to, there's not going to be an enforcement action starting on the 21st. It's just a line they drew in the sand. We just have to start working towards it. So just start making the effort, and I think you'll be in good shape. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend.